Okay, let's talk about two of the most infamous disasters in modern history, the Titanic and 9/11. We all think we know these stories, right? They're etched into our collective memory. But what if I told you that when you look at them through one specific lens, the lens of survival, the story you think you know gets completely flipped on its head?
Now, both of these were, without a doubt, absolute catastrophes. But the data shows something incredible. In one of them, the main story isn't actually about loss. It's overwhelmingly about survival. So which one do you think it was? Go on, take a guess. I bet the answer is going to surprise you. All right, first up, let's travel back to 1912. Picture it, the freezing cold waters of the North Atlantic. The sinking of the Titanic. I mean, it's become the gold standard for maritime disasters, a story where it just felt like everyone's fate was sealed from the start.
And the numbers, they tell a really grim story. The overall survival rate was only about 32%. Think about that for a second. For every 3 people on that ship, 2 of them, they were lost to the ocean. Just staggering.
And if we look at the raw numbers, it gets even more real. You had over 2,200 people on board, and more than 1,500 of them died. I mean, that's just a massive, massive loss of life. No wonder it cemented the Titanic's legacy as this infamous tragedy.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Survival wasn't just about luck, not at all. It was heavily, and I mean heavily, influenced by what kind of ticket you had. If you were a first-class passenger, you had about a 62% chance of survival. But if you were down in third class, that plummeted to just 25%. On the Titanic, your social class was literally a life or death statistic.
And of course, we can't forget the other huge factor here, that famous maritime rule, women and children first. It was the protocol of the day, and it absolutely dictated who got a spot on those precious few lifeboats, which, directly shaped the survival numbers.
Okay, now let's jump forward in time, almost 90 years, to September 11th, 2001. We all remember it as a day of just unimaginable loss, and it absolutely was. But when you dig into the data from the World Trade Center, a totally different story starts to emerge. And honestly, it's pretty surprising. This right here, this is the number that just changes everything. An incredible 87%. 87% of the people inside the World Trade Center towers survived. Now put that next to the Titanic's 32%. It's an almost unbelievable difference, right?
So, there were about 17,400 people in the towers. And look, the death toll of nearly 3,000 people is a horrific, heartbreaking tragedy. We can never forget that. But here's the fact that often gets lost in the story. More than 15,000 people got out. 15,000! It was actually one of the most successful large-scale evacuations in history.
So, okay, we've got these two monumental disasters. Let's put their outcomes right next to each other and see just how completely different they were.
And yeah, the difference could not be more stark. When you look at the Titanic, the story is all about that smaller number, the handful of people who survived. But with the World Trade Center, it's the exact opposite. The story is defined by that huge number, the massive majority who actually made it out. So it really all boils down to this one simple, pretty shocking contrast. We remember both as these immense tragedies defined by death, but the data tells us something else. The story of the Titanic is about most people dying. The story of the WTC, against all odds, is about most people living. And that, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? How could two such devastating events have such wildly different outcomes when it came to survival? Well, the answer isn't in the event itself, but in the circumstances surrounding it. For the Titanic, its fate was really sealed by a perfect storm of factors. First, it was a sudden event, and they were totally isolated, out in the middle of the freezing ocean. Second, resources were a disaster. There were nowhere near enough lifeboats for everyone. And third, communication was just a chaotic mess, which made any kind of coordinated rescue basically impossible.
Now, the World Trade Center, in complete contrast, had 3 crucial things working in its favor. First and most importantly, time. For a lot of people, there was more than an hour between the plane impacts and the towers collapsing. Second, procedure. People knew what to do, thanks to years of fire drills and evacuation plans. And third, the response. A massive, coordinated emergency response was on the scene within minutes.
And this is really the key takeaway from all of this. For all the terror of these events, survival wasn't just about the initial disaster. Not by a long shot. It really came down to everything else.
the environment you were in, the resources you had, and the procedures that were or weren't in place. So this all leaves us with one final thought. The lessons from these tragedies, they're all around us today, right? Think about the number of lifeboats required on a cruise ship now, or the fire drills we do in our office buildings. Those are direct results. So the real question is, how do these hard-learned lessons continue to shape our world and make us safer every single day?